So, hello everyone. Welcome to the ASU 2021 Data Conference, coordinated by the ASU University Technology Office. My name is Todd Kemper, and I'm your Zoom host. I work for OPB, or I've worked for OPB in the past. I work for UTO and Data Intelligence Department. Do a lot of reporting. Here to help out anything that Stephen or Christina need. Remember to stay connected and continue the conversation in our Slack channel, the ASU Data Community channel. And with that, we're going to start our recording. I kicked it off a little bit earlier and want to welcome our presenters, Christina Smith and Stephen White. And yeah, so we're going to keep going. I'm going to hand this over to Stephen and Christina.
Alrighty. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Christina Smith. I'm a business analyst senior in the University Registrar Services Technology section. And Stephen White is my co-presenter. He's a business intelligence developer in the data success area of UTO. Stephen White and I worked together on developing the Alteryx Workflows behind the enrollment tracking reports for several months together. And so this is kind of the fruit of that labor. Alrighty, so hopefully everyone is ready to discover some of the secret ingredients behind enrollment, our enrollment tracking reports. Note that the focus here is not really about how to build Alteryx workflows or using the Alteryx tool. What we're here to do is kind of take a deep dive into the workflows behind the enrollment tracking reports. And the goal is to help you better understand the actual data and to better utilize the data in your own custom reports that you can create from the outputs that come from these two workflows. Because we have a lot to cover, I'm going to ask you to save your questions for the last 5 minutes. So Todd, at 5 minutes till, let me know when we hit that mark if I haven't already stopped rambling on about the slides. So I want to give everybody plenty of time to ask their questions.
Will do.
And with that, so our overall agenda, we're going to talk about the Alteryx workflows themselves. We're going to look at the tables used, and then we're going to get into the fun part with the secret ingredients. So to start off with the Alteryx workflows, we're going to cover, there's two different workflows that feed into the enrollment tracking reports. We're going to talk about the in-database elements, the in-memory elements, the outputs, and the output granularity. So this screenshot here, what you're looking at is a very zoomed out look of the actual workflow. The enrollment tracking, there's two workflows, one that's called the enrollment tracking comparison data set and one that is the enrollment tracking current data set. The comparison compares like terms, and the current data set has current data only. The workflows themselves for both of these look virtually identical. The comparison data set provides data for all of the comparison reports on the Analytics Enrollment and Records Group enrollment tracking page. And Todd's going to put a link in the chat there if you need to look at that. This data set uses snapshot tables to provide like term enrollment comparisons. And so like term means fall to fall, spring to spring, summer to summer. The snapshot tables contain data based on the week and or day number that is before or after the first day of a given term. And so that allows us to have a very direct apples to apples comparison based using the first day of classes as our benchmark. So for example, today, 11/16/2021 is day minus 55 for spring 2022. And the snapshot will match up the enrollment data from 11/17/2020 as day minus 55 for spring 2021. The current data set provides, and actually let me go back here on the slide. So this is showing you the enrollment tracking page, and what I have highlighted here are the reports that are specifically comparison based. The current data set provides data for all of the current reports that are on the enrollment tracking page. Again, these reports have data for the current date only, and that's as of the last data warehouse update. So for example, some of you who are in the know and paying attention to things might know that we're a little bit behind on the data warehouse update today. So the data on this page isn't going to get updated until I have a chance after this presentation to actually go rerun the workflow. That will then update the reports that show up on enrollment tracking. And then so later today, you will actually see these update with today's date. And actually, I'm sorry, I'm talking about the comparison ones in that instance. Okay, moving on. So in the Alteryx workflows, we have in-database elements, and this is a screenshot of what those elements look like. Both workflows start with similar elements, and we pull in basically each of the required Redshift tables as well as one AUDB table. We'll talk about that later. These are filtered and then joined together as required. And so each of these are bringing in basically separate tables. We do have one InDB element that is doing some SQL work for us off of the class data. But other than that, each of these are just bringing in individual tables. And then you'll see here, we also have some formulas and stuff. We'll talk about those later. Then we have the in-memory elements. Again, both workflows are very similar with these. Here we create additional custom fields that are used in the reports. And there's a lot of fun things going on here. We'll be able to cover some of it, but that's the in-memory portion of it really allows you to do a lot. Finally, both workflows have similar output elements that create the AUDB tables used in the reports, as well as the CSV files that are available for your own custom reports. Each workflow creates two tables. The comparison workflow creates the enrollment tracking comparison and the enrollment tracking comparison detail tables. The current workflow creates the enrollment tracking current and the enrollment tracking current detail tables. Each of these have three outputs. One that goes to the enrollment records team schema, one that goes to the enrollment records enterprise schema, which allows other users outside of the RegTech team to have access to the AUDB tables, and then another one that goes to the CSV files. So it's basically a total of 12 outputs, or 6 in each workflow. So let's talk about the granularity of each of these. The enrollment tracking comparison and the enrollment tracking current each have one row per student per term. The enrollment tracking comparison detail and current detail have one row per term, per student, excuse me, term, and class number and subplan if the student has multiple subplans. Because the detail outputs, the class numbers, excuse me, I have a mistype there in my notes. In the detail outputs, the class numbers will be duplicated if the student has multiple subplans, i.e. one class number for each subplan. If you don't need to identify subplans, users using the AUDB tables or the CSV detail outputs will want to filter the ASU primary record flag to Y in the student profile major table to have one row per student, term, and class number. A little fun fact to know about how that works there. Okay, so that is our overview of the Alteryx workflows. Now we're going to deep dive into the tables. And so these are the tables that we'll be talking about. Our first table is the ASU enrollment comparison terms table. So this is the first table in both workflows. This is a custom table that Stephen White specifically designed. And it's essentially designed to do the heavy lifting of identifying the desired enrollment tracking reporting terms and the comparison week or day for today. The term and comparison week and day is used in the comparison workflow. The current workflow only uses this table to identify the current workflow only uses this table to identify the desired reporting term. So let's talk about the table itself. The first 4 columns in this table have the reporting terms, the snapshot week and day, and the created date time. as well as the comparison term. The comparison term basically allows us to group the like terms. Sorry, I'm going to just. So the comparison term field allows us to group the two terms that we are comparing, looking at the latest term. So you'll see the fall terms are grouped, and then your spring and your summer. The active enrollment term field is simply identifying the terms that are actively enrolling students right now. The comparison term flag finds the comparison terms where at least one of those terms have active enrollment. We have, of course, our term sort field. We have our label fields that provide the different descriptions that we use in various reports. We have the term sequence number and the summer flag to identify summer terms. Stephen, anything else you want to clarify on that one?
Yeah, and this table is available in the Redshift data warehouse, so anyone can use this. We just find it very helpful, especially when you go to a report and there's a drop-down list where you get to select which term you want to run the report for. We found that we were sort of repeating that business logic in a lot of different reports. So now we have all of that baked into this one table. So on a lot of reports, when you use that drop-down menu, it's just looking at this table to figure out what the current terms are, what the current snapshots are, and it's automatically updated as we roll along through new terms. So we're able to reuse that logic and maintain it in one place.
Right. And the key thing to keep in mind too is that this one, other than finding the prior term snapshot dates, this table doesn't time travel. It's always as of today. So there's one little exception to talk about there though. If there is a snapshot missing for a particular date, this table will find the last date where the snapshot exists for both terms being compared. So for example, looking forward to December 24th of this year through December 26th, this table will have snapshots for day -18 for the spring 21-22 comparisons. But because the data warehouse is not updated on holidays or when there are system updates, you'll see that for day -17, 16, and 15, you're actually not going to be able to, this table won't produce snapshots for those dates because one of those terms are missing. And so for each of those 3 dates, you're going to have only day -18 available. And so hopefully that's clear as mud there on that one. But that's actually a really nice feature of this table as well. Okay, moving on. So next we're going to cover some of the primary tables used in the enrollment tracking reports. And so we have the student profile major term, student profile term, student enroll, A class, and D person view. The comparison workflow uses the snapshot version of these exact same tables. And of course, the current one is the non-snapshotted versions. The comparison tables you'll see have slightly different naming conventions, but they all end in snapshots, so they're easily identify. And then the current tables have the more friendly names that you can find, and these are all available in Redshift. I have highlighted here, so I have highlighted some of the differences. Notice that the D person view here is coming from global. These are really common, heavily used tables. If you want more information about these tables, there's a lot of other sessions that we've had, either probably in the current data conference, but also from past years that we'll talk about these tables. There's also a lot of information on the Slack channels with how to use these tables. And of course, you can always contact Redshift. We'll have that information at the end of the presentation. So, but these are really good tables to be very familiar with and to know and love. They're some of our favorite tables. Another one of our favorite tables is a census table. It's a CS Desker academic plan table. And what you see here is a list of the fields that are included in this table. This has many of the friendly descriptions that we use in the enrollment tracking reports. The table is also used to identify campus of major in specific cases. This can be different than the campus found in the student's program plan stack in PeopleSoft, again, in certain cases. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And last but not least, we have the one AUDB table that we pull into our workflow, which is under Enrollment Records Enterprise, and it's called Campus Table. And so this table essentially provides us with the friendly descriptions that we want to use for the campuses. It allows us to provide a custom sort value and gives us all of the groupings that we need as well in all of our reports. It also helps us identify if a particular campus has active enrollment yet. We have a primary campus indicator. So very often a lot of our reports are grouped by what we call for campus. And so the Tempe, West Poly, downtown will very often be grouped into its own summarized subtotal. Then the rest of those are then location and online. And so this is a really helpful table that we use and maintain as well. Okay, now we get to the fun part, and that is the secret ingredients. And so here we're going to talk about workflow filters, a little bit about conceptually how the formulas are used, the NDB formulas and in-memory formulas. So first to talk about the workflow filters. So these filters are all exactly the same in both comparison and current, with a couple of little differences that I have highlighted here. So with the ASU enrollment comparison terms table, the comparison is looking for both of the term sequence numbers. The current one is only using the term sequence 1. Then we have the student profile major term table, and this is being filtered to only enrolled students off of the ASU enroll status. And then we're looking at the primary academic career and the primary program flag. We use these particular flags out of this table because there's some of our reports in the enrollment tracking allow us to drill down to the subplan level. So in order to capture when students have 2 subplans and view both of those subplans, that's why we use these particular flags. For the comparison output and the current output, so in other words, those non-detail outputs that we were talking about, those are filtered to the ASU primary record flag. So we only get that 1 row per term per student. Then we have the student enroll table. This is excluding any enrollment in the no credit career classes. And so those are not included in any way. And then the student has to be enrolled in the class. And so it's excluding any dropped, withdrawn, or canceled statuses for any classes that the student might have. Okay, so now when it came down to deciding what formulas that I wanted to discuss in this presentation, I found that it was helpful for me to kind of think about how the formulas are being used. There's a total of 74 formulas used in each of these workflows. And we're only going to be covering a few of them in this presentation. But the main way that these are used, so we have formulas that are used to create something that is directly used in the report, so usually like a description. A lot of them are used to help filter the report or to group values in the report off of some specific values. And a whole bunch of them are used as what I would call a utility field. So they're a sort field, they're used to aggregate values in the report, or a formula that produces a value that's needed in another formula. And we'll show some examples of some of that. And a lot of the fields fit into more than one of these categories, but they're used in a lot of different ways. And it was helpful for me to really kind of think about this. So let's talk about the NDB functions that are used. We have some basic case when, a lot of case when statements. Almost all of them are using case when. We love our case when. Substrings, we use a lot of that as well. Concatenation, usually just the double bars usually. Null value, and so if A is null, then B, else A. And there's a few places where we do some comments as well within some of the SQL too. But most of them are going to be using one of these functions. So now we're going to cover some of what I'm calling the important formulas here. So the student state reported, campus of major, NRC, RNI, career, and academic level. And I'll explain what these two are when we get to them. So the first one is student state reported. So to start with this, our first step is that we had to identify class state reported. And also I want to make another note here too, is that in these examples, I'm going to be just using the table names that are coming from the current workflow. But again, those are the same tables used in both. They just have some different names. But because these are the friendly names, you'll see those friendly table names here, just because those are easier to recognize. So to identify a student as state reported, we first have to figure out if any of the classes that they're enrolled in are a state reported class. And so first we're looking at whether or not it's a summer term. So for anything that's not a summer term, in the student profile term table, we're looking for the ASU state funded flag as a yes, the ASU exclude from state is no. And in the class table, we're looking to see that the ASU state funded is Y. Or it's a summer class. If these are all true, then it's a yes, otherwise it's a no. And so that's going to give us for each class, a yes or a no that the student's enrolled in. So then the next step to actually roll the class state reported up to the student state reported is that we are finding the max class state reported value. So we're looking alphabetically at the Y or the N for each student in term. And then this gives us our student state reported with a yes or no value. Okay. So next one is campus of major. So this formula is producing a desired campus code. So it's not a description, it's a code that is associated with the student's major. This in turn joins into the AUDB campus table to get our descriptions, assorting, and groupings for campus. The campus for the student profile major term table is the campus that shows in PeopleSoft in the student's program plan stack. This value can be changed by advisors and may or may not be the same as the campus the major is reported under. The census table, Desker Academic Plan, identifies the correct reporting campus for the Tempe, West, Poly, and downtown campuses. So this formula is first looking for campuses in the student profile major term that are not Tempe, West, Poly, or downtown, and where the census campus code is not university or null. Then, if the value is a global academy, it makes it online. So we just group those in there. Otherwise, it'll be a campus from student profile major term. So that's the first else statement. So these values are basically going to be online in all the other locations other than Tempe, West, Poly, or downtown. Otherwise, the value will be the campus code from the census table, which is the last else statement. And so and this is actually joined on the ACAD plan table, or ACAD plan code, excuse me, from between the student profile major term and the CS Desker academic plan table. Okay, next we have new, returning, and continuing is what NRC stands for. So this formula is providing us with the desired descriptions for the new, returning, continuing groups in the enrollment tracking reports. All of these fields are coming from the ASU student profile major term table. It's a pretty straightforward case when statement. The main items of note here are when we are using the academic plan to identify new visiting university student, and when we're using degree to separate out the new degree seeking graduates and the new non-degree seeking graduates. Something to note about this, descriptions like these can and will change when requested by executive leadership. And so during COVID, that's when we saw the visiting student value come in, and this split out here between the graduates came in a little bit before, right around that time, I think. So this can change. And so what's really nice about these workflows is that it allows us to make these types of changes quickly and then have the desired values automatically feed down into all of the reports that use these fields. And so this is one of the things that we really do love about how this Alteryx workflow works for us. So next we have RNI, which is basically Arizona resident, Arizona non-resident, and international students. The first the formula identifies students with a minority status not equal to X and residency is equal to res as an Arizona resident. Then students with a minority status not equal to X and residency equal to no res as non-resident. Then finally, students with a minority status of X as international. And so again, I want to focus on these because these are some of the key elements that are used, the key fields that are used in our reports. And so when you're creating your own reports, it's really important for you to understand how these are created and what's behind the scenes and under the hood with these, so to speak. So career, this is a straightforward formula providing descriptions used in the enrollment tracking reports. But the key point that I want to make here is that there's 3 different career fields in this data set. One that groups graduate and law students together as graduate, one that splits out graduate and law, and finally course career. And so again, just to be aware that there's 3 different careers in here, used all in different specific ways for each of the specific reports that these feed into. Then we have academic level. So while the academic level description is available in the student profile major term table, this formula accounts for some specific scenarios and counts students into the correct reporting group that we want them counted under. So undergraduate students with an academic program of UGPR or an ASU exchange student type that isn't blank are counted in the non-degree undergraduate level. The requirements for this criteria can change on if it's a summer term or not. Also, if a student is missing an academic level, they're classified as a senior. This usually happens as a result of bad data and that we work to get fixed when we discover that it is out there. And in most of these cases, those students should be seniors anyway, so it just defaults them to a senior. So now we're going to get into the in-memory functions. And so the functions that we use, again, we're back to our good old if then else. And there's a couple of different flavors of that we use. We use the regex replace, which this is a function that Stephen White covered in a whole lot of detail in our work a couple of sessions ago. And so I would point you back to that one to learn more about how this one works. We use replace strings. We have left, right, and length as well that we're using in here. So we're not going to have a whole lot of time to dig deeply into these remaining formulas, but what I do want to share is how these formulas feed into each other conceptually. This is going to be a more high-level look at these in-memory fields. And so more just to kind of show just how complex you get with, working with some of these. It's kind of really interesting to see how a lot of this was created. Okay, so first, we're going to talk about hour bands. And so the first step in identifying the hour bands was basically to identify the hour range that we needed for the groupings that we wanted. And this, by the way, shows in the headcount, the classified and headcount reports. Note that the output here is the EMPL ID. This is because we count the EMPL IDs in the report groupings to get our aggregated totals. Also note that the formula is repeated for all of the groupings that we need by campus. And so this runs down a whole lot longer and captures, each of these have a version for when we're grouping all of them together, when we're doing Tempe, West, Pauline, downtown. The next step is that we identify other required elements that we need in the final formula. And so in this case, we are identifying the campus grouping used, looking at the ASU enroll state for the campus. Or all is also an option here too. And this is coming from the student profile term table. And then our final field that is used in the reports is the final hour band. And so this is our hour band description field that we actually use in the end result. And again, we have, each of these for each of the combinations that we want to show in our reports. And so again, that's just a really good example of one formula feeding into another. So headcount campus field this is an interesting one. This is an aggregated field used specifically in a parameter for the classified and headcount report. So students can be enrolled in classes with different campus funding. So this field allows the parameter to find all values that contain, for example, Tempe, and thus we'll find all the students enrolled in Tempe funded classes. And so there's a lot of work here with handling the multiple commas and giving us a clean list that then allows the filter to function well with doing, finding anything that contains Tempe. So it's going to find all of these combinations to find our students that we want to do the head count on. And so our next one is to talk about classification. And so there's actually two fields that are called classification used in the SCH and FTE class funding reports. The first version group students enrolled in 6 units or less is unclassified. Then if a student is 7 or more units as resident or non-resident. The second version expands on this by splitting the unclassified group into resident and non-resident as well. And so again, just to point out that there's actually 2 different flavors of classification. If you look at the SCH report there on the enrollment tracking page, you'll see both of those further down on that report there. And then last, this formula is the SCH FTE Campus. This formula provides campus descriptions used in the SCH FTE class funding reports.